I might be pregnant. If I were pregnant, I wonder what environment would be best for raising a child. When I discussed this with Susan, she laughed dismissively and said,
Of course, the city is the best. You're foolish, so do as I say.
I was thinking somewhere surrounded by a natural environment might be nice.
I don't know whose idea you've been influenced by, but living here is best. The transportation is convenient, and shopping isn't a problem, right?
Well, yes. I thought this was convenient for Susan, who loves it here, but I kept that to myself. My name is Mary. It's been 3 years since I had an arranged marriage with my husband, Brian. We lived in a rented apartment for the first year of our marriage. But a little into our second year, we started living in a high-rise condo with Susan. It was mostly her insistence. As I cheerfully sent Brian off to work, Susan turned to me with a blank expression and coldly said,
Don't just stand there, get cleaning. You really are slow.
"From the first day we lived together, Susan was cold to me. I don't really know why. After all, moving in together and living in a high-rise were both quite sudden. I distinctly remember the grimace on her face when she visited the condo we were living in.
With such a high household income, living in a place like this,
She said with dissatisfaction. The condo was a typical property, and there was no particular issue, but she didn't answer when I asked what she was dissatisfied about. She just looked at me with a look of disdain. After I finish cleaning, I start working in my room. There's an online meeting today. About 30 minutes into the meeting, suddenly the door was thrown open with a loud noise.
have you lost your mind talking alone?
I turned around in surprise to find Susan with her eyes glaring. Naturally, her shouting and appearance were transmitted to the other side of the monitor. Wow, Susan. Didn't I tell you I have an online meeting today? My voice cracked with embarrassment and haste. After excusing myself to the others on the call, I pushed Susan out of the room.
Another one of those creepy meetings. Why don't you go to the office? It's weird.
That's the policy now. It might be noisy, but please try to understand.
You're always in and out of the office. It's not some shady business, right?
It's a reputable company, rest assured. Sorry, I really need to get back.
I wonder what this meeting is all about.
No matter how often I explain, Susan needs help understanding my work style. Being interrupted during an online meeting has happened too many times to count. Returning to the monitor, I sincerely apologize for the interruption. I told them I would go to the office at dinner with Brian back home tomorrow. Susan looked skeptical.
You barely go to the office. You're practically stealing your salary,
When I'm not at the office, I work from home.
or just pretending to. The earnings from such a lax company must be laughable. You'd earn more in a part time job.
Brian gently intervened against Susan's sharp words.
Come on. These days, there are many ways to work.
Is that so? But since Brian earns plenty, I guess that's all right.
Susan quickly dropped the subject. She loves her son, Brian, excessively. That night, we talked about parenting in the bedroom. I suggested a place with a natural environment to Susan, but she was against it.
What did Mom say?
She prefers the city. She said it's fine right here.
She likes it a lot because, Mom's hometown is deep in the mountains, and she was quite shocked in many ways when she moved to the city for marriage. Maybe that's why.
Has she developed a complex about it? But I'm from the countryside too. And the place I'm thinking of isn't that remote.
Mary, you went to a prestigious university. Times are different from Mom's.
Brian's response was off point. But if it's a matter of different times, that could be an opening to gain some understanding. I brought up the idea that we wanted to raise our kids again on another day.
This topic again?
Susan looked displeased, but I expected that reaction. I expressed myself poorly last time. Not the middle of nowhere, but the suburbs. A distance that wouldn't burden Brian with his commute.
What's wrong with here? If you don't like a well-maintained park, the only other option is deep in the mountains.
Even if it's well maintained, I was thinking about a green model district, a place that attracts plants, insects, and birds.
What? Because you studied a lot and went to a smart university, do you want to say you want your children to grow up freely?
Her unexpected remark caught me off guard, and I couldn't respond immediately. Susan continued with a sneer.
Right on target. Don't push onto your child what you couldn't do yourself.
No, that's not it. I studied because I had things I wanted to do. That has nothing to do with our child.
We'll see about that. Why don't you go alone if you like nature so much?
I didn't know how to make her understand anymore. Despite feeling tired that night, I discussed Susan with Brian in the bedroom, like before.
Do you really want to move that much?
It's not about moving. It's about the environment for raising our children. What do you think? Brian closed his eyes and fell silent as if deep in thought.
Mom has experience, after all. Maybe we should listen to her more carefully.
I was disappointed by this response. I wanted to hear his own thoughts. That's when I realized something. Brian has always been quiet, but he's not without opinions. Yet, since living with Susan, he has always deferred decisions to her. Susan is a dominant person. I felt this when she wouldn't let me handle the kitchen. She criticized every dish I made and finally said I didn't have to do it anymore. She gives orders about everything, even when I'm working from home. If I respond that I'm working, she scolds me loudly.
Mom's opinions are valuable. I wish you wouldn't dismiss her so casually.
I'm not being dismissive. I wondered if Brian was watching Susan's mood. Or if he actually agreed with her. Or I was just being self-centered. I'll think it over. With that, the conversation ended, and we went to sleep. However, after that, a series of business trips and office days followed, so much so that I barely had time to think, let alone return home. It feels like it's been 2 weeks since I last opened the door to our home. Brian's shoes are there. He seems to be back already. I'm home. Here's a souvenir for you.
Welcome back. You must be exhausted.
Brian greeted me with words of appreciation and smiled at the sight of the souvenir. And this too. Oh no. Some work documents got caught and spilled out as I tried to pull another souvenir from my bag. As I hurriedly gathered them, I noticed a shadow looming. Looking up, I saw Susan with a cold expression.
Have you been using your business trips to scout for a new place to move?
Of course not. I wouldn't do anything like that without discussing it.
Then what's all this?
She pointed to the scattered documents, including pamphlets and property photos. What terrible timing. These are documents for work.
Lies, sneaking around under the guise of work. How sly and underhanded.
It's true. You can check with the company if you'd like.
There's no need for that.
With her face turning red with anger, Susan turned to Brian.
It's clear now. Brian, you've been deceived. You've been defending her because she's your wife, but she's taken that as a license to do as she pleases.
Brian, that's not true. I called you to tell you where I was, didn't I? You know how tough the commute was every day. Do you think I'd choose such a place? I was indeed in a place that required traveling by bullet train or airplane. Brian slowly picked up one of the documents. Looking down at it, he said,
It's just the kind of place Mary wanted.
I felt a darkness of despair wash over me. I didn't understand what Brian thought when he said that, but his words deeply hurt me. Susan looked down on me scornfully as I was at a loss for words.
I was opposed to this marriage from the beginning. I only agreed because of your aunt.
This aunt's husband was my father's boss, which started our marriage discussion. I had no idea Susan was opposed. She never showed any signs, so I completely missed it. But now I understand why she has been so harsh towards me since we started living together.
You always looked down on me, acting all high and mighty with your intelligence, always insisting your way was better.
I never looked down on you.
Yes, you did. Always boasting about how working mostly online was cutting edge.
I never made such a face nor thought that. Why would you think that?
You must have been mocking Brian in your mind for going to the office every day, no matter if it's hot or cold.
That's not true at all. I also work outside sometimes, so I never thought that way.
This arrogant, insufferable fool of a wife. Get out! Brian, hand me that.
Brian sighed heavily and pulled a paper from the sideboard drawer. Brian handed me divorce papers. Really? You're serious?
It's hard for me too when things are this tense with Mom.
What about you? What do you think?
I can't accept someone who disrespects my mom.
Brian had always put his mother first. My words had not resonated with him at all. Filled with sadness, disappointment, and anger, I silently signed the papers, quickly packed what I needed, and left the house with the documents. 3 months had passed since I started living in my new place. During that time, I had not been in contact with Brian at all. I had blocked his number. Since nothing came into my mailbox either, he had no intention of apologizing. Nothing from Susan either. That's it then, I thought, as another month passed and I calmed down. I wasn't pregnant. I got my period a week after being alone, and various ailments had cleared up. The symptoms similar to early pregnancy must have been due to stress. It was disappointing not to be pregnant, but thinking about a child, I felt more relieved. Now, I need to take care of myself. Then one day, an email from Brian arrived. What's this about now? My response was cold. I deleted it without reading it. But the emails kept coming, sometimes 3 or 4 a day. It started to creep me out, but then I remembered something. When I opened the latest one, I couldn't help but laugh at the expected content. Finally can't make the payments. The rent for a 2-bedroom luxury apartment was a burden for him, earning $2,000 monthly. Especially since Susan wasn't working. Susan thought she could live off Brian's earnings. In reality, it was my income that had supported us. Brian must have realized the misunderstanding too, but the fact that this email came suggests he was secretly using his savings without telling the truth. What's this about trying again? We'll end up repeating the same issues. I called him to settle things once and for all.
Back then, none of us were in the right state of mind, right? Why not try again?
Brian suggested. Really? Then answer me this, if we were to raise a child, what kind of environment would you want for them?
I would have to listen to my mom's thoughts first.
I want to know what you think, not Susan's thoughts. After all, it would be our child. That would have been fine if he thought the luxury apartment and that district were the best. I only wanted to hear his thoughts, but I only got silence. Instead, he asked if I had gotten pregnant. I thought so, but no, I wasn't. As I answered, suddenly, Susan took over the call.
What a terrible daughter-in-law, harassing us with money. Brian is trying to apologize, but you ramble on. So argumentative and uncharming.
Let's just make it easier for both of us. It's been 3 months since the divorce was finalized. Maybe Susan could manage if she got a job.
That's none of your business. You might cool off and apologize, but what a thing to say. Heartless.
We are strangers now. Goodbye. Please dispose of anything of mine that's still there.
I already threw them out.
Is that so? If that's the case, there's nothing left to revisit. I ended the call feeling extremely unpleasant and blocked the number again. I could change my phone number and email. Sometime after that call, I coincidentally found out that the luxury apartment they were living in was put up for sale. They couldn't manage to keep living there. It felt like everything was finally over. I'm done with marriage. I want to live freely for the rest of my life. My mom says I'm still young and I'll probably meet someone nice again. We'll see if something like that happens. Years later, I might find myself starting a marriage born from love.